Ray, if you had been there, you would have seen it. The exact moment Marcus realized everything he stole slipped right through his fingers. He thought he buried me, but by dawn, I was the one lowering him into the grave of his own making. If you don't want to miss more confessions like this, subscribe now, because the stories I tell here aren't just revenge. They're the truth no one dares to speak aloud. The boardroom smelled of polished oak and stale coffee, the kind of place where futures were sealed in whispers and signatures. I straightened my blazer, clutching the pen I'd brought to sign the expansion deal we'd spent 2 years preparing. My best friend, my business partner, Marcus, sat across from me, his smile thin as glass. The director shuffled papers, waiting for us to speak. The lights hummed overhead, a cold buzz that made my stomach twist. Something in the air was wrong, like static before a storm. I tried to push the thought away, but Marcus's eyes, sharp, calculating, held something I had never seen before: victory at my expense. The chairman cleared his throat, expecting me to begin, but Marcus rose instead. His voice carried a casual arrogance as he tapped the table with his knuckles. "Gentlemen and ladies," he said, pausing just long enough to draw all eyes. "There's been a development. Effective immediately, I am sole CEO of this company. My partner," his gaze flicked toward me, "has been removed from all authority." A hush swept the room, punctured only by the clink of someone's glass against the table. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Removed? My throat tightened, words trapped in disbelief. I laughed, brittle and sharp, hoping this was a sick joke. "Marcus, what the hell are you talking about?" The pen slipped from my fingers and rolled across the table, stopping by his hand. He picked it up slowly, twirling it like he was savoring the moment. "Oh, come on," he said, his grin widening. "Don't act surprised. The transfer's already been processed. Every asset, every share. You signed the wrong documents last quarter. Didn't you read the fine print?" The board members shifted, murmurs rising like restless waves. My blood pounded in my ears. No, I thought. Impossible. But Marcus's confidence was unshakable, as if he'd been rehearsing this betrayal for months. "Security," Marcus snapped, and the doors swung open. 2 men in dark suits entered, their steps heavy, deliberate. My pulse spiked as they came toward me. Chairs scraped back, papers scattered, but no one stood to defend me. The very people I'd built this empire with sat frozen, complicit. "You can't do this," I hissed, my voice low, trembling but fierce. "I built this company with you. Every late night, every pitch, every client, I was there beside you." Marcus leaned closer, his breath warm and cruel in my ear. "And now you're gone. That's business, darling." He pulled back, flashing a smile at the board like a wolf showing its teeth. The room erupted in polite applause. It wasn't enthusiastic, but it was obedient, the kind of clap people gave when survival meant silence. Each smack of their hands was a nail in the coffin of my trust. I forced myself to stand, though my knees threatened to buckle. The security guards flanked me, their shadows stretching long under the fluorescent lights. My chest burned with shame, rage clawing its way up my throat. Marcus sat down in my chair, my place at the head of the table, like it had always been his. "Gentlemen, shall we proceed?" he asked, sliding my folder of notes aside like yesterday's trash. His audacity made the room tilt. For a moment, I saw him not as my friend, but as the stranger he truly was. Dragged toward the doors, I caught one last glimpse of Marcus basking in his triumph. He didn't just take my company, he wanted to take my dignity too. My heels clicked against the marble floor, echoing like a drumbeat of exile. Every fiber of me screamed to fight, but I forced my face into a calm mask. He wanted to see me broken. Instead, I gave him silence. Because deep down, past the fury and disbelief, I knew something Marcus didn't. I had a card left to play. And while he celebrated his victory, mine was already written in the shadows. The doors slammed shut behind me, leaving the boardroom to its new king. The guards released me in the hallway, their job done, their eyes avoiding mine. The silence of the corridor was suffocating, broken only by my breathing, shallow and sharp. My heart pounded with the weight of betrayal, but beneath it, a strange calm surfaced. Marcus thought he had ended me. He thought this was my downfall. But I had been preparing for this moment longer than he could imagine. What he stole tonight, I would reclaim by dawn. And when the board saw the truth, the applause he earned would turn into silence. Long before the boardrooms and contracts, it was just us. Two ambitious dreamers with nothing but empty pockets and wild ideas. Marcus and I had met in college, bonded over late-night study sessions and cheap takeout. He had the charm, I had the drive. Together, we were unstoppable. I still remember the night we decided to start our company, sitting on the floor of my tiny apartment, scribbling plans on napkins while rain hammered the windows. Marcus raised his glass of watered-down whiskey and said to us, "We'll conquer the world." I clinked my cup against his, never imagining that one day those words would taste like poison. We built our empire from scratch, one brick at a time. I took double shifts, poured my savings into equipment, lived on instant noodles while Marcus schmoozed investors with that effortless grin of his. Where I saw risk, he saw opportunity. Where I hesitated, he leapt. And somehow it worked. Clients trusted us. Investors believed in us. Within 5 years, the company we dreamed about became a reality. We weren't just partners, we were family. I trusted him with everything, the books, the contracts, even my secrets. When people called us inseparable, I believed it. I thought betrayal could only come from strangers, never from the person who stood beside me at every victory. But the cracks began to show, faint at first. I noticed Marcus's eyes lingered too long on profits instead of people. I saw the way he dismissed employees who weren't useful enough. I excused it as ambition, telling myself every empire demanded sacrifice. Still, the unease gnawed at me, a whisper I kept shoving aside. "We're in this together," Marcus always said, clapping me on the shoulder, and I forced myself to smile. I wanted to believe him. Needed to believe him. Because the alternative, that he was becoming someone I didn't recognize, was too painful to face. There were moments, though, when his mask slipped. Like the night we landed our biggest client, and instead of celebrating with me, Marcus vanished with a group of investors, chasing after bigger promises. I spent that evening alone, nursing champagne that had lost its sparkle. Or the morning he stormed into my office, demanding I sign a stack of papers before a meeting. "Just formalities," he said, waving away my questions. His impatience cut deeper than the contracts themselves. I signed, trusting him the way I always had. Now I know those papers were seeds of my downfall, planted with a smile I thought was friendship. Still, I clung to the history we shared. Memories of us working side by side, laughing at failures, dreaming bigger than our circumstances allowed. I told myself Marcus was still that boy who toasted with cheap whiskey in my apartment, still the friend who believed in me when no one else did. Betrayal, after all, doesn't announce itself. It creeps in like rot, hidden beneath polished wood until the whole foundation crumbles. Looking back, the signs were there, glowing red. I just refused to see them. Because how do you admit that your best friend is becoming your enemy? How do you accept that the person who once lifted you up is the same one tightening the noose? I told myself loyalty was stronger than greed, that Marcus would never turn on me. I ignored the warnings, blinded by years of trust. And when he finally struck, I wasn't just losing a company. I was losing a piece of myself, the part that believed in forever. That's the cruelty of betrayal. It doesn't just steal your present, it rewrites your past. Now, standing outside that boardroom, the memories burned sharper than the humiliation. Every laugh, every late night, every handshake, they weren't just memories anymore. They were weapons turned against me. But memory is a strange thing. It can wound you, yes. But it can also remind you of who you are, of what you've survived. Marcus thought he'd buried me beneath his betrayal. What he didn't realize was this: I had been watching him longer than he knew. And while he saw me as naive, I had already set in motion the one thing he couldn't control. The city slept beneath a curtain of rain, but I was wide awake, the glow of my desk lamp slicing through the shadows of my office. The world outside believed Marcus had won, that I had been discarded like an old draft of yesterday's plans. Let them believe it. I leaned back in my chair, fingers brushing the edges of a locked drawer, the one place Marcus never touched. My hands trembled not with fear, but with purpose. Betrayal sharpens a person, carves away hesitation until all that's left is resolve. Tonight, I wasn't the woman dragged out in shame. Tonight, I was the architect of his undoing. I slid the drawer open, revealing a folder I had guarded for months. Inside were documents, copies of agreements Marcus had dismissed as routine. He never cared to read the fine print, too blinded by his own arrogance. But I had read every line, every clause, every comma. Hidden within the tangle of legal language was my escape hatch, an amendment I had slipped in quietly, filed with the right signatures, notarized under the dull hum of fluorescent lights, while Marcus sipped cocktails with investors. It was my insurance policy, born from a gut feeling I couldn't shake. Betrayal hadn't surprised me because somewhere, deep down, I had always known he was capable of it. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the office walls. My reflection in the window stared back at me, pale but steady, eyes colder than they'd ever been. I gathered the papers, arranging them with meticulous care. Every page told a story Marcus had ignored, a story that would change everything at midnight. Still, doubt lingered, like a ghost whispering at the edge of my mind. What if the board sided with him? What if the contracts failed? I pressed the thought down hard. This wasn't the time for fear. It was the time for precision. One mistake and Marcus would win for good. My phone buzzed against the desk, a notification from my attorney. All set. Midnight submission confirmed. Relief washed over me, but it was fleeting. Midnight was still hours away, and until then, I had to live with the silence, the waiting, the storm building in my chest. I walked to the window, watching the rain streak down the glass like falling timelines, each drop carrying a memory of Marcus's betrayal. The boardroom. The applause. His whisper in my ear, "That's business, darling." I closed my eyes, replaying his smug grin. Let him laugh. Let him celebrate. When the clock struck 12, he'd choke on the very victory he flaunted. The office creaked, the kind of sound that makes you believe you're being watched. I glanced toward the door, half expecting Marcus to burst in, demanding answers. But there was no one. Only shadows stretching long across the carpet, growing and shrinking with each flicker of the lamp. I returned to my desk, writing notes for the speech I'd give once the truth came out. Not emotional words, not a plea. No, my speech would be a verdict, sharp and undeniable. If Marcus had stolen applause today, I would take silence from him tomorrow, the kind that cuts deeper than any cheer. As the hours crawled on, I rehearsed every move in my head. The contracts were secure, the filings untraceable, the timing flawless. Still, I paced the office, driven by a restlessness I couldn't tame. Betrayal wounds, but it also awakens something primal, a hunger for justice, for balance. Marcus thought he had caged me, silenced me, erased me. He didn't know I was already beyond his reach. Midnight wasn't just a deadline. It was a rebirth, a moment when the scales would tilt, and everything he clung to would slip from his grasp. When the clock finally struck 12, the storm outside raged in perfect harmony with the storm within me. I placed the final call, my attorney's voice steady on the other end. It's done. By dawn, it will all be yours again. I exhaled, long and heavy, as if I had been holding my breath since the boardroom betrayal. Dawn would bring answers, consequences, and Marcus's reckoning. For now, the city slept, unaware of the war being fought in silence. I turned off the lamp, letting darkness swallow the room. Tomorrow, the stage would be his, until the curtain fell. Midnight wasn't quiet, it roared. The rain hammered against the city like a war drum, thunder cracking open the sky. My phone buzzed with confirmation after confirmation. The filings had gone through, the amendments triggered, the transfers locked. What Marcus thought was his empire was, line by line, slipping from his fingers. I stood in my office, the glow of the clock painting 12:01 across the wall. For the first time since the boardroom, I smiled, not out of joy, but out of the cold satisfaction of inevitability. Marcus's triumph was already over. He just didn't know it yet. Emails flew like daggers, landing in inboxes across the company. My attorney's voice filled my ear. The shares have reverted. The contracts are binding. At sunrise, you'll be the only legal owner. I nodded, gripping the phone as if it anchored me. Every step had been calculated, every detail cross-checked. This wasn't luck. This was architecture. I had designed Marcus's downfall with the same precision I once used to build our dreams. Except this time, there would be no partnership. There would only be me. Across the city, Marcus was celebrating, no doubt drunk on champagne and delusion. I could almost see him now, raising his glass, basking in the empty praise of people who feared him more than they respected him. He believed the world bent to his will. He believed I was finished. And that belief, that arrogance, was the very rope tightening around his neck. Midnight wasn't just a deadline. It was a guillotine, silent and unseen, descending while he danced in ignorance. The servers hummed as the filings updated in real time, the company's ownership charts redrawing themselves with my name highlighted, bold and final. My laptop screen glowed with the proof, contracts signed, sealed, time-stamped. I leaned closer, watching Marcus's name vanish from the ledger like chalk washed away by rain. The sight was intoxicating. Betrayal had stripped me raw, but this was power. Not the kind built on applause or deceit, but the kind born from endurance. From foresight. Marcus had thought I was naive. Tonight, I proved him wrong. But with victory came the waiting game. I paced the office, heels clicking against the floor, each step matching the pounding of my heart. Sunrise would bring the reckoning. Until then, I rehearsed the scene in my mind, Marcus striding into the boardroom, smug and certain, only to find his throne turned to dust. The board's silence as the truth unfolded. The flicker in his eyes when realization set in. I savored the thought like a final rehearsal before opening night. Every betrayal deserves an audience, and his undoing would play to a full house. The hours bled together, but I never slept. My mind replayed every detail, contracts checked, submissions verified, signatures authenticated. It was airtight. There was no loophole, no escape. Marcus had built his coup on illusion, while I had built mine on stone. And when the sun finally broke through the rain-soaked horizon, painting the city in pale gold, I knew the time had come. The stage was set, and Marcus was already walking into the trap he'd never see coming. By dawn, I was seated in the boardroom again, the very seat he had stolen from me hours before. The directors filed in, their faces weary, cautious. Whispers rippled through the room as Marcus entered, swagger in his step, arrogance etched into every line of his face. He didn't even glance at me, too busy relishing the moment. But when the chairman cleared his throat and began reading the updated filings aloud, silence spread like wildfire. Marcus's grin faltered. My name, my signature, echoed through the room, undeniable and final. His empire, his triumph, his applause, gone before his eyes. And in that silence, I finally had what I'd been waiting for, not revenge, but justice. The boardroom was a theater, and Marcus was center stage. He leaned back in his chair with the arrogance of a man convinced the world still bent to his will. But when the chairman's voice cut through the air, effective immediately, control reverts to its rightful owner, the room shifted. A ripple of disbelief spread, papers shuffled, eyes darted. Marcus froze, confusion etched across his face. Then the words landed, my name. Clear, final, undeniable. The silence that followed was deafening, like the pause before thunder splits the sky. Marcus's smile faltered into a twitch, his hand tightening around the glass of water before him. That's impossible, he muttered, his voice cracking under the weight of truth. He scrambled for the documents, flipping through pages with shaking fingers. The contracts told the story better than I ever could, his coup dissolved, his empire gone. Each stamp, each signature was a nail in the coffin of his ambition. He looked up, searching for allies among the board, but all he found were lowered eyes and folded arms. The applause he craved had turned into a graveyard silence. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I simply sat still, my calmness cutting sharper than any insult. Marcus rose to his feet, his chair screeching backward, desperation spilling from him in waves. She's lying. This can't be legal. She tricked you all. His voice cracked into a plea, stripped of its usual venom. But no one moved his defense. The same people who once clung to his shadow now leaned away from him as if betrayal was contagious. His empire had vanished, and so had their loyalty. The chairman cleared his throat. The filings are verified. The ownership is clear. You no longer hold authority here, Marcus. His gavel struck the table, sealing the decree like a verdict. Marcus staggered, his bravado crumbling. He turned toward me then, eyes burning with a mixture of rage and disbelief. For a moment, the mask of control slipped, and I saw him for what he truly was, small. A man who built his empire on deceit, now watching it collapse in front of him, powerless to stop it. I stood slowly, letting the silence stretch. Every eye in the room followed as I adjusted my jacket and spoke, voice steady but carrying the weight of finality. You thought you could erase me. You thought you could strip away everything I built. But you forgot one thing, Marcus. This company was never yours to take. It was mine from the beginning, and it will be mine long after you're gone. My words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. Truth carries its own thunder, and in that moment, it struck harder than any scream. Marcus's shoulders sagged, the fight draining from him. He reached for one last retort, one last shred of dignity, but nothing came. His mouth opened, then closed again, like a man drowning in air. Security stepped into the room. Not because I asked, but because the company demanded it. He was escorted out, his footsteps echoing like the fading beat of a war drum. No applause followed him. No allies remained. Just the hollow sound of a man who had lost everything he thought untouchable. When the door shut behind him, I exhaled for the first time. The boardroom felt different, lighter, as if the walls themselves had been waiting for this moment. My hands rested on the table, steady, unshaken. The storm was over, and I was still standing. Not as the victim he tried to make me, but as the architect of his downfall. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Marcus's empire had ended, and mine had just begun. Betrayal looks loud in the moment, but it crumbles in silence when truth takes the floor. If you felt every word of Marcus's fall, then subscribe now. The next story might just keep you awake tonight.